Mr. Pearson, I am so sorry I'm late.
She walked into the CEO's office at the exact moment he received the news that his fiancée had arrived. The problem? The fiancée wasn't her. Melanie shouldn't have broken her heel, spilled coffee on her blouse, or knocked over the picture frame of his father. But when Zane Pearson, the CEO better known as Heart of Ice, looks at her and says, "Finally, my fiancée," the mistake turns into a contract. Over lunch on day one, Melanie learns that lying doesn't pair well with grey eyes. She said she spoke French. She didn't. She felt his hand find her waist under the table as he whispered, "If you're going to fake it right." But the photo of them leaks. Manhattan believes the engagement. What she didn't expect was that the real fiancé was on her way, and that one was out for blood.
Hi, I'm Rowan. A special shout out to those of you watching Book 1 for free here on the My Stories platform, completely ad-free and uninterrupted.
Chapter 1. Wrong Office, Wrong Bride. The alarm didn't go off. Or it did. And Melanie Preston, in the exact second the sound flooded the tiny Queen's bedroom, hit the wrong button and went back to sleep. When her eyes finally opened for real, the clock on the nightstand read 9:15. The grey September light was seeping through the patched curtain, and there was the unmistakable smell of reheated coffee escaping from the half-open kitchen door. She sat up in bed all at once, and the whole room seemed to tilt. "Mom," she called, voice still rough. "Mom, I overslept." Briar Preston appeared in the doorway with a sewing rag on her shoulder and a needle between her lips. 52 years old, hair pulled back in a low bun, glasses hanging on her chest from a satin ribbon she'd sewn herself. She coughed twice before taking the needle out of her mouth. "I know, my golden thread. I tried to call you twice. The white blouse is hanging on the chair. I put a new button on it. The top one was loose." "I love you, Mom," Melanie said, already throwing the blanket aside and jumping onto the cold floor. Love you, but I'm going to miss this interview." "Coffee's on the table." "There's no time for coffee. There's time for a cup." The white blouse was yanked off the back of the chair, black pants, blazer worn at the elbows, but dignified from a distance. The resume was on the kitchen table, inside a clear plastic folder, and Melanie had already rewritten that document 3 times in 2 weeks, taking out and putting back the same words like someone trying to convince a mirror. She grabbed the cup, took a quick sip, felt the liquid go down scalding, shook her head when her mother gestured to offer more. "You're gonna nail it, my thread." "I'll try." "No, you're gonna nail it. I sewed that button on with a prayer." Melanie laughed despite the nerves. She kissed her mother's temple, smelled talc and fabric, held her shoulder a second longer than she meant to. The cough came back mid-hug, soft, almost polite, and it was because of that cough that the interview existed. $32 for the consultation, $800 for the exam, $3,000 for the treatment that the neighborhood clinic had stopped offering because the insurance changed networks. Every cent of that executive secretary position was, deep down, a cent of her mother's lung. "I'll be back early." "Go with God and watch out on the station stairs. It's raining." It wasn't raining, it was threatening to. Same thing, the stairs at the Line 7 station had always been treacherous, but that morning they seemed to hold a personal grudge. Melanie ran down, thin heel hitting every step, resume pressed against her chest, and it was exactly on the next-to-last flight that her right foot lost its footing. The heel cracked with a dry, audible snap, and her ankle twisted inward at a sharp angle of pain. She caught the handrail in time to keep from falling, but the cup of coffee she'd bought on the way, because a sip in the kitchen wasn't coffee, it was just manners, flew out of her free hand and drew a generous arc before landing on the freshly pressed white blouse. "No," Melanie said to no one. No. The brown stain spread through the fabric as if in a hurry. The heel dangled, crooked, half-broken. She took off the shoe, examined the damage like someone examining a diagnosis, and made the only rational decision possible. She walked barefoot on one foot to the train car, balancing the heel in her hand, trying not to think about what that meant for the general notion of a functional adult she was about to display in a few minutes. The car jolted. An older woman next to her offered a tissue without saying a word. Melanie thanked her 3 times, scrubbed at the stain, smeared the stain, discovered there was no salvation for the stain. When the train spat her out in Manhattan, she took a deep breath, slipped on the crooked shoe, tightened the blazer over the blouse to hide the worst of it, and crossed Park Avenue at half stride, half breath, completely late. The address said, number 1109, Park Avenue South. The building in front of her was dark glass, too tall to see without tipping her head back, and Melanie tipped her head only enough to confirm there was a big number on the facade, 1190, and she went on ahead, certain that memory, in that state of panic, was a reliable document. It wasn't. The lobby was light marble, smelled of expensive flowers and silence. The receptionist behind the counter looked at Melanie for 2 short seconds, registered the crooked heel, the stain, the hair escaping the bun, and did what elegant receptionists do when someone looks like the wrong person in the right place. She smiled without moving her eyes. "May I help you?" Interview. 11 o'clock. Executive Secretary. Preston, Melanie. The receptionist typed something quickly, looked at the screen, raised her eyebrows for the length of a breath. Top floor. Private elevator to the right. Melanie thanked her, crossed the lobby, trying not to limp, found the elevator, pressed the button. The door opened right away, mirrored on the inside. She stepped in, pressed the only button available, which seemed to lead to a single place. The elevator rose too fast for a building that size, without stopping at any intermediate floor, and when the doors opened, Melanie knew, before she even saw it, that she'd walked into the wrong room. The hallway was a short corridor that ended in a smoked glass anteroom, and the anteroom ended in a double door, and the double door was ajar. There was no secretary, no plaque, no murmur of other candidates waiting their turn. There was a middle-aged assistant talking quietly on the phone behind an empty desk, and she looked up for half a second, saw Melanie, and gestured with her free hand toward the double door, like someone dispatching a package that was about to arrive late. Melanie thought about asking for an explanation. She didn't. She crossed the anteroom, pushed the door ajar, took 3 steps inside. The office was enormous. Floor-to-ceiling glass on one entire wall, Manhattan spread out there like an expensive map. Dark carpet, a glass desk the size of a queen's kitchen, 2 leather chairs in front of it, and a third behind it, by the window. Behind the desk, standing with his back to the view, was a man. Black suit, tense jaw, wide shoulders under the well-cut fabric. He turned slowly when he heard the sound of uneven heels on the carpet, and Melanie saw, in the order in which one sees what matters, the grey eyes, the serious mouth, the expensive watch on his left wrist. Storm grey eyes was the exact expression, and she realized in that instant that the expression existed for a reason. He didn't greet her. He didn't extend his hand. He looked at her like someone checking the time on a document. "Finally," he said, voice low, controlled, without inflection. "My fiancé." Melanie laughed. It was a nervous, short laugh that escaped before any calculation, because the sentence made so little sense in that context that her body chose to laugh as it would choose to sneeze. He didn't laugh. "Sorry," Melanie said, still half laughing, still not understanding. "There's just... You said fiancés, and I came in for a secretary interview, so I think there's been a small..." "Sit," he cut in. "Right. That's what I was about to explain. I think I walked into the... Sit, please." The please was more of a decree than a request, but it came out with such cold courtesy that Melanie obeyed without realizing she was obeying. She took 2 more steps, found the first available chair, sat. Only after that did she notice that the chair she had sat in was the one on the other side of the desk. His, the one by the window, tall with a wide back, clearly occupied a few minutes ago by the coat folded over the armrest. She widened her eyes, half rose, tried to stand up all the way. She knocked into the picture frame that was at the edge of the desk, turned toward whoever sat there, and the frame fell from the desk to the carpet with a muffled thud. The glass didn't break, but the photo flipped over, an older man's serious, expensive watch on his wrist, posing beside a slightly younger Zane on some terrace. "Oh my God," Melanie said, kneeling on the carpet. "Oh my God, I swear I... Get up. I can fix it." "There's nothing to fix." She lifted the picture frame with both hands, ran her thumb over the glass as if there were dust, tried to straighten the back support that had gotten bent, and for an absurd moment she brought her thumb to her mouth and used a little saliva, to wipe a mark that probably wasn't even a mark. She looked up mid-gesture. He was watching. "I'm not going to use saliva on your father," she said quietly, more to herself. "I'm going to stop now." Something passed across his mouth. It wasn't a smile. It was the place where a smile would have started on another man. It lasted half a second. She put the picture frame back in its original position, maybe a millimeter crooked, got up with all the dignity that a cracked heel allows, and stood on the wrong side of the desk, still behind his chair, as if her presence there was the exclusive responsibility of a draft of air. "Sir, I think I walked onto the wrong floor. I came in for an interview for an executive secretary position scheduled for 11, with the company at number 1109, and I think based on everything I've just done that this isn't number 1109. It isn't. Ah? It's 1190. Ah? Pearson Holdings. I've heard of it." "I imagine so," he said, and his tone was that of someone who imagined nothing. It was that of someone who knew she'd heard of it, knew how much, knew in what newspaper. The double door opened in that second with a short sound, and a man with light brown hair walked in a way that suggested familiarity with the office. 30-something, light grey jacket, loose tie, Mont Blanc pen held between two fingers as if it were a cigarette. He looked at Melanie, looked at Zane, looked at the crooked picture frame, raised an eyebrow slightly. "The Mercier have arrived at Coquelicot," the newcomer said with an Americanized Irish accent. "They're after the Bordeaux. Said they'll wait another 15 minutes before they start making wrong decisions." "They always make wrong decisions," Zane replied, without looking away from Melanie. "True, but it's better that they make our wrong decisions, not their own." The man took another step in, extended his hand. "Phelan Marlowe, house attorney. I see the young lady has already settled in." "I didn't settle in," Melanie said, maybe too quickly. "I dropped it. There's a technical difference." Phelan cracked a half smile. He looked at Zane as if checking whether this was supposed to be comedy or trouble, and since Zane said nothing, Phelan went with the first option and held back his laugh with more effort than was polite. "Charming," he murmured. "Phelan," Zane said, "call the car." "It's already downstairs." "Call it again." Phelan tilted his head, turned on his heel, closed the door behind him. When the sound of the door faded, Melanie took a deep breath. She tried to take back control of a narrative that had slipped out of her hands at the exact moment she pressed the wrong button of the wrong elevator in the wrong building. "Mr. Pearson," she said, with the firmest voice she could manage. "I'm so sorry for the mix-up. I'll go down now, find number 1109, and if the lady at reception wants, she can dock from my salary, the dust I tracked onto this carpet. Have a good afternoon." She took a step toward the door. "Stop," he said. She stopped. "What's your name?" "Melanie Preston." "Melanie Preston," he repeated slowly, like someone making a note. "Do you speak French?" Melanie hesitated. She thought of the job, the bill, her mother's lungs. "I get by." "Excellent. I didn't say that." He picked up the coat from the back of the chair that was still between them, put it on without rushing, adjusted the lapel, came around the desk on the opposite side from her. When he passed close by, his scent, clean, expensive, something woodsy, arrived before the rest of him. He stopped half a meter away. He looked at the cracked heel, at the stain on her blouse, at the crumpled resume that Melanie was holding the way a child holds a toy. "Come," he said. "Lunch in 15 minutes. "Are you offering me lunch?" "No. I'm taking you to one." "Mr. Pearson, you're my fiancée for today." Melanie stood still. She looked at his hand, which extended unhurriedly, palm up, like someone offering a branch in a river. She looked at the door behind her, at the elevator going down to real life, at number 1109, which had probably already called the next candidate. She looked again at his hand, and the hand stayed there, waiting, as if time inside that office obeyed a different clock. Chapter 2. Lunch, Agreement, and the Friend in a Panic. The car was black, low, silent in a way Queen's cars didn't know. Melanie got into the back seat after Zane, buckled her seatbelt without needing to look, and stayed with the crumpled resume on her lap as if that paper were the last piece of identity she still controlled. Phelan took the front seat, turned sideways, Mont Blanc pen spinning between two fingers. Le coquelicot, Phelan said to the driver. Then, to Zane, in a lower voice, the Merciers came in a group of 3. The father, the son, and the father's wife who understands more than the 2 of them put together. I'll sit next to her, Zane answered. Good. Who sits next to the young lady? I do. Phelan raised his eyebrow a millimeter. He didn't comment. He turned to Melanie with the neutral cordiality of someone who'd handled hundreds of strange situations from that same seat. Miss Preston, quick little question. Are you allergic to any food? To not eating. Excellent answer. You'll go far. The car glided down Park, turned onto 52nd, stopped in front of a restaurant with a discreet facade with a single red flower painted on the window. The maitre d' was already waiting on the sidewalk. He greeted Zane by surname with the reverence of someone greeting a painting, and led the group down a short hallway to a private room at the back, where a round table seated 6 and smelled of warm butter. 3 were already seated. The Mercier patriarch, grey-haired, round glasses, silk pocket square in his suit pocket. The Mercier son, 30-something, hair slicked back, eyes that tried to look older, and Madame Mercier in the centre, short silver hair, a smile that didn't reach her eyes, and eyes that reached everything. Pearson, said the patriarch, rising gently, and, Melanie, Zane said, with his hand resting lightly on her back, at the exact height where the spine begins to curve. My fiancée, the word hung in the air. Melanie smiled like someone learning to smile in slow motion. Madame Mercier tilted her head with renewed interest and extended her hand. Enchantée, ma chère, she said in soft French. Zane ne nous avait pas dit que vous étiez si jeune. Melanie held her hand firmly. She felt Zane's hand slowly leave her back and slide down 1 centimetre, 2 centimetres, and stop. Enchantée, Melanie answered with the most convincing accent she could manage. Merci. Vous parlez français? Un peu, a little, très, très peu. Mais, quel accent charmant. Vous avez étudié où? Melanie felt the temperature rise a notch in her face. Phelan, at the corner of her vision, held back something that had the look of a cough. Zane, beside her, said nothing. He just pulled out the chair for her to sit, and when Melanie sat, he sat next to her, and his hand found unhurriedly the curve of her waist under the white tablecloth. Elle est trop modeste, Zane said in clean French without affectation. She's modest. She learned from her mother, who's of French descent, through her grandmother. Aren't you, chérie? The pressure of his hand on her waist lasted half a second. It was enough. Yes, Melanie said. Grandmother. On my mother's side. Comme c'est joli, Madame Mercier murmured, and turned to the menu with the piety of someone who had decided to spare the prey out of sympathy. The drinks arrived. The men talked in English about figures Melanie tried not to listen to. Phelan made a joke about Bordeaux that drew a laugh from the patriarch. Zane didn't let go of her waist. He didn't squeeze. He was just there, like a signature. It was between the first course and the second that he leaned toward her, with the pretext of grabbing a piece of bread from the basket, and said, too low for the table to hear, too close for Melanie to breathe properly. If you're going to fake being my fiancé, fake it right. His breath hit her ear. Melanie felt the hair at the nape of her neck rise in a way that she found, in that instant, an absolute betrayal of her own body. I didn't offer, she whispered back, eyes on her plate. I know. Then why are you pretending with me? Because you walked in. She slowly raised her face. He was looking at his plate, chewing calmly, as if the sentence he'd just said hadn't crossed one of her ribs. His hand on her waist made a small movement, the thumb 1 centimetre, a single arc, and came back to a stop. Melanie, under the table, pulled back her left foot from the cracked heel, and without looking, positioned her heel exactly over his expensive leather shoe. She pressed down. She squeezed. Not with force to hurt, with force to sign. Zane didn't react. He took a sip of wine, cut a piece of what was on his plate, looked at the Mercier patriarch, picked back up a sentence in English about European liquidity, and only then, with the discretion of someone passing along a document, let a brief movement escape across his mouth that was, with no doubt to anyone watching closely, a half smile. Madame Mercier saw, the patriarch saw, the son saw. The three of them seemed at the same time to find different things funny. Mon Dieu, Madame Mercier said softly to her husband. Il sourit. The patriarch confirmed with a gesture. Phelan, from across the table, met Melanie's eyes for a fraction of a second and did something with his lips that suggested that hadn't happened since Obama's second term. Melanie pulled her foot off his shoe, drank some water, didn't look at Zane for the next 10 minutes. The verbal agreement of interest in the merger was signed between the second course and dessert, with a handshake over glasses of liqueur, and the Mercier patriarch raised his glass in her direction with a paternal wink that had the clarity of someone else's sentence. À la future Madame Pearson. Melanie raised her glass. She smiled. She drank. On the ride back, she tried to say something 3 times. The first time, he was looking at his phone. The second time, he took a call in Russian that lasted 6 blocks. The third time, she gave up, rested her temple on the cold glass, and looked at Manhattan going by too fast. He dropped her off in front of the Queen's building without getting out of the car. Phelan turned in his seat with a card between 2 fingers. My direct number, Miss Preston, in case you need it. Why would I need it? In case you need it, Phelan repeated, with the same neutral friendliness. Things at Pearson have a habit of happening fast. The car pulled away before she finished climbing the 3 steps. Melanie went in, closed the door carefully so as not to wake her mother sleeping on the couch, went straight to her room, sat on the edge of the bed, and only then looked at her own reflection in the mirror on the closet door. The white blouse stained with coffee, the cracked heel dangling from the arch, her hair escaping the bun, her mouth still alive from the sip of liqueur, and underneath all of that on her waist, the exact memory of his hand, the thumb, the short arc, the heat that shouldn't have lingered. She picked up the phone. The FaceTime rang 3 times before Wren picked up, and when she did, her hair was held up with a yellow pencil and her face filled the whole screen because she always held the phone too close. "Girl," Wren said all at once, "you're alive. I was about to call the hospital. How was the interview?" "Wren, don't use that tone. That tone is the tone of, I sat in the manager's chair. Did you sit in the manager's chair? Worse." "What do you mean worse? There's no worse." Wren backed away from the screen, then came back. "Wait, are you headline material? Why do you have headline face?" "Wren, talk." "I walked into the wrong building." "Okay." "I took the private elevator." "Okay." "I sat in the CEO's chair." Still okay. "I knocked over his father's picture frame." Continue. "And he called me his fiancée." Wren was silent for a second, which was, for Wren, the sonic equivalent of an earthquake. "Say it again." "He called me his fiancée. He said, 'Finally, my fiancée.' He thought I was someone else. Then he took me to lunch with 3 French people. I lied that I spoke French. He caught it on the first sentence and he put his hand on my waist and said, 'If you're going to fake being my fiancée, fake it right.' Girl, I know. Girl, I know. Girl, focus." Wren sat down on the floor of her own room, holding the phone with both hands. "Who is he? Got a name? Got a last name?" "Pearson." The silence on the other end changed quality. Wren opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again, and when her voice came out, it was already unhooked from reality. "Pearson as in Pearson Holdings?" "I think so." "Pearson as in Zane Pearson, the man Forbes put on the cover in December calling him Heart of Ice." "Wren, Pearson as in controls a third of Park Avenue and has never smiled in a photo." "Wren, you pretending to be the fiancé of a billionaire." Wren covered her face with her free hand. "I'm going to faint." "I'm going to faint, and when I wake up I'm going to kill you for fainting first." "I'm not going to see him again," Melanie said, more to herself. "It was a lunch. It's over. Tomorrow I'll send out resumes for other jobs, forget this day, and life goes on." "Sure. Sure, for real." "Okay." Wren took the pencil out of her hair, bit the tip, put it back. "We'll talk tomorrow. Drink water. Eat something. Don't think about him. And don't think about his hand on your waist specifically. I wasn't thinking about it." "Liar." Melanie hung up. She lay on her back on the floor of her room for a while, looking at the stain on the ceiling that had always reminded her of a piece of Italy. She didn't think about him. She thought about other things. She thought about her mother, about the heel, about the resume, about the pharmacy bill that was due on Friday. She didn't think about him. She didn't think. She slept in her clothes. She woke up to a knock at the door at 9 sharp. Briar had already opened it. When Melanie reached the living room, barefoot, still in the day-old blouse rumpled from sleep, her mother was standing in front of a uniformed man, tall, 50-something driver's cap in his hand, impeccable posture. "Good morning, Miss Melanie," he said. "I'm Calder. Mr. Pearson asked me to pick you up." "Mr. Pearson didn't tell me anything." "Right, ma'am. He tends to do it that way." Calder didn't smile, but something around his eyes nodded at the world. "I have orders to wait as long as you need. And if I don't go? Then I wait longer." Briar looked at her daughter with an expression Melanie had known since she was 7, the expression of, "You decide, but decide well." 40 minutes later, showered, with the worn blazer once again over a clean blouse, Melanie got into the black car. Calder closed the door carefully. The trip was silent, crossed the bridge, went up to the Upper East Side, stopped in front of a building that looked like a giant mirror propped on the corner. The penthouse took up the whole top floor. High ceilings, light walls, an entire wall of windows. Zane was in the kitchen, leaning against the marble counter, sleeves of his shirt rolled up to the elbow, coffee in a white mug. No suit, no tie. He was still the same man, but on a different scale. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning. Coffee?" "No." "Sit." She sat on the high stool. He pushed a mug toward her anyway. He didn't insist that she drink it. He just left it there in case. 3 weeks, he said. "That's how long until the Pearson-Whitehead merger is announced and closed. I need a visible fiancé during that period. Events, photos, 2 or 3 dinners. Nothing beyond that." Pause. "In exchange, I'll secure your job." "What do you mean, my job?" "The executive secretary position you went to interview for yesterday. Not the one at 1109, a better one, at whichever company you want, in whichever role you want, with a salary compatible with Manhattan and full benefits." "You don't know me. I saw your resume." "When?" He took a sip. He didn't answer right away. "I see a lot of resumes." Melanie looked at the white mug, at his hand holding hers, at the window that showed half the city as if the city were a commissioned model. "And my mother?" He raised his eyes. "What about her?" "My mother is sick. Expensive treatment. That's why I went to the interview. That's why I lied that I spoke French. That's why I'm here right now listening to you. If we're going to make an agreement, I want it to cover her treatment. Full. Until the end." He looked at her for too long a time for a man who made decisions quickly. Then he nodded, once. "Covered. You didn't even ask the amount. It doesn't matter." It was the most dangerous sentence she'd heard in her life. 3 weeks, she repeated quietly, more to herself. "And then we each go our own way. We each go our own way." She extended her hand over the marble. Her hand was still the hand of someone who had spent the morning of the day before counting subway change. His was still the hand that had landed on her waist under the white tablecloth. 3 weeks, Melanie said. "No heart involved." He squeezed. "Deal." And the squeeze lasted a second longer than the contract called for. Chapter 3. The apprentice bride Madison Avenue had a very particular way of making Melanie feel wrong. It wasn't just the immaculate glass of the storefronts, nor the smell of new leather escaping the double doors. It was the silence of the sidewalks, as if every pedestrian had learned early on that that neighborhood didn't tolerate the noise of people in a hurry. Calder stopped the black car in front of a facade without a sign, only a discreet bronze number, and opened the door for her with the gentleness of someone delivering a fragile package. "You're going in, Miss Melanie." "I'll wait here," he said, adjusting his cap. "The lady inside has been notified." Melanie swallowed hard and clutched the strap of her purse as if it were a lifebuoy. The modest dress she had chosen that morning, bought on clearance 2 winters ago, already seemed like a joke before she even crossed the threshold. The door opened on its own, pulled by a woman with a low bun and a trained smile. "Miss Preston, we were expecting you." The boutique had no racks. It had a honey-coloured velvet sofa, a round table with steaming white tea, and 3 employees who looked as if they had been chosen by height. The dresses arrived from another room, held up on satin-lined hangers, as if they were guests, not clothes. The personal shopper introduced herself as Henriette, French for real this time, and Melanie almost laughed thinking about lunch the day before. She was positioned on a round pedestal, surrounded by 3 mirrors and undressed with such polished efficiency that she didn't have time to come up with a joke. When the first dress fell over her shoulders, champagne-coloured silk, embroidery so fine you could barely see it, her breath caught for an instant. For the Met Gala Saturday, Henriette explained, pinching the fabric at the waist. Mr. Pearson asked for something that wouldn't draw attention through shine. Through elegance, yes, through shine, never. He asked for it in those words. In those 2 words, mademoiselle, elegance, never. Henriette gave a sidelong smile. Mr. Pearson has a lean vocabulary. Melanie looked at her own reflection and didn't recognize herself, which was perhaps the point. The blouse with the spilled coffee had been left behind in another life. The woman in the mirror had a long neck, shoulders without apologies, a waist that the fabric acknowledged. For a second, she forgot about her mother coughing in Queens about the treatment contract, about the absurdity of it all. For a second, she was just a woman in a beautiful dress. Then Henriette left to get the shoes, and Melanie was alone with the linen napkin folded next to the tea. The pen from her purse fell into her hand, as if it belonged there. Without thinking, she began to draw. A sleeve, a curve of waist, a neckline she would never see in a catalogue of that kind, because it bore the mark of someone who grew up watching her mother hem other people's wedding dresses and imagine her own. The strokes came out quick, sure, without the tremor that appeared in her real life. On the napkin, Melanie didn't apologize for existing. On the napkin, she gave the orders. "May I see?" Henrietta's voice came back sooner than expected. Melanie hid the napkin under her plate with the speed of a child caught with a cookie. "It's nothing, just doodles." "Mademoiselle." Henriette had an eyebrow that arched like a ruler. "I worked with Galliano for 6 years. I know doodles. That wasn't a doodle." Melanie turned red to the roots of her hair. The woman didn't insist. She just adjusted the shoe on the customer's foot, jotted something down in a little notebook, and disappeared the way she'd come. The napkin stayed there, folded near the plate, near anything that seemed destined for the trash. When she got up to change dresses, she forgot to take the napkin. Forgot it, and it was an honest forgetting, the kind a person only notices weeks later, when the object resurfaces somewhere else and she can't explain how it survived the journey. That night at the penthouse, Calder opened the car door in a rehearsed motion. Phelan Marlowe was waiting in the hall on Zane's floor with a leather portfolio and the Mont Blanc laid across his fingers. "Good evening, future missus," he said, and his smile had that Irish irony that didn't fit inside an Italian suit. "I brought a few little things for the young lady to sign, nothing that would ruin the night. Maybe just the decade." "Phelan," Zane called without looking at him from the other side of the room. He was standing by the window against the New York sky, glass in hand. "Fewer jokes, more paper." "A boss without a sense of humor is a boss on a stopwatch," Phelan shot back, and Melanie laughed softly for the first time that day. The attorney winked at her. "See?" she laughs. "It's proven she's human." The portfolio opened on the glass table. Pages and pages, tiny paragraphs, clauses folded into clauses. Phelan pointed at the fields with the pen without offering a reading. "Here, here, here, and here, it's standard. Non-disclosure agreement, image use authorization, social event appearance form, nothing major." Melanie looked at Zane. He was still with his back to her, cut against the light, shoulders impeccable in the dark suit. His voice came without him turning. "You don't have to read it now if you trust me." "I don't trust you," she answered, and the sentence came out with a Queen's accent, one of the firm ones. "I closed a deal with you." "It's not the same thing." Zane turned half of his face. His profile against the window had that hard old coin design. For an instant, she saw the corner of his mouth move. It wasn't a smile. It was closer to an admission. "Fair." Phelan coughed out a laugh and tapped the Mont Blanc against the portfolio. "Miss, honestly, I can give you an Irishman's guarantee. Nothing in there obligates you to actually get married. Not in this version." The pen twirled in his fingers. "That I guarantee." Other things I won't comment on. She signed. She signed quickly without reading carefully, because the alternative was sitting and reading for hours and still not understanding, and because Zane's grey eyes were burning into the back of her neck in a way that made reasoning difficult. When she handed back the portfolio, Phelan winked again and put the papers away with an almost paternal care. It was a pleasure, future ex-fiancé. Saturday there's a gala. Saturday there's photography. Saturday there's Alicent. Who? Melanie asked. Zane turned all the way around for the first time. The glass in his hand dropped a centimetre. Phelan, go. I'm already going. The attorney gathered up the portfolio with the calm of someone who had learned to obey without offence. Before crossing the door, he still tossed over his shoulder. Miss, take a coat. October wind is deceiving. The door closed. The room became too big for two people. Who is Alicent? Melanie repeated without looking away. Zane set the glass down on the table. He walked over to her with that stride that seemed measured in seconds, not meters. He stopped too close. His white shirt smelled of something clean and expensive that she wouldn't know how to name. An heiress, Whitehead Group. My father chose her to be my fiancée before you fell onto the wrong floor. His voice dropped a tone. She'll be there Saturday. She'll want to touch you. She'll want to say something in your ear. Don't take the bait. I don't take bait. You took the French bait. That was survival. This is going to be too. He didn't touch her. He stood there, still. Too close for friends. Too far for lovers. In the strange space they'd been occupying for less than a week. Melanie felt her chin rise a millimetre of its own accord. You should have warned me earlier. I'm warning you now. Are you always going to be late on the important information? His mouth trembled. It wasn't a smile. It was almost. Probably. Saturday night came fast. The entrance of the Met was a corridor of flashes, long dresses trailing across the carpet, voices wrapped in accents that Park Avenue cultivated like rare flowers. Melanie stepped out of the car with Zane's hand closed over hers, and the first photograph of the night captured exactly that. A man who hadn't smiled in 4 years, holding a stranger as if she were an answer. Inside the ballroom, the soaring ceiling gilded on an absurd scale. Waiters in white gloves circulated with flutes of champagne. A string quartet was playing something Melanie vaguely recognized from an old movie. Breathe, he said in her ear. I introduce you, you smile, you don't speak French. Does a bad mood go with a black suit? It goes with a whole life. She swallowed a laugh. His hand slid down from her waist 1 centimetre, and that centimetre made a difference. It was in that instant that the air changed. Melanie felt it before she saw it, the way you feel when someone enters a room with intent. The woman had honey-coloured hair, a burgundy dress that looked like a bath in paint, and the kind of elegance that is inherited rather than learned. She crossed the ballroom toward them unhurriedly, because hurry was for those who still needed to arrive somewhere. Zane, darling, she said with a British accent so polished it cut, you've disappeared from your father's phone. Her hand landed on his forearm with the familiarity of someone who had already rehearsed the gesture in other rooms. Melanie felt her stomach drop 2 floors. Alicent, Zane answered, dry voice. You remember Melanie? We haven't been introduced. Alicent's smile turned toward Melanie with the precision of a scalpel. But of course I know who she is. All of Manhattan knows who she is. Pleasure, Melanie said simply. Her voice didn't shake, and she felt proud of that for an entire second. Alicent leaned in just a little, only enough to whisper with poisonous gentleness. Some women simply aren't prepared for this world, darling. It's not a flaw, it's nature. But I admire the attempt. The family ring twisted on her finger, a small, almost invisible movement that Melanie only caught because her mother had sewn at fancy enough weddings to teach her daughter to read jewellery the way one reads gossip. Before Melanie answered, Zane did 3 things in sequence. First, he removed Alicent's hand from his arm as if brushing off a speck of dust. Second, he extended his hand to Melanie, palm open, in a small and absolutely public gesture. Third, he turned his back on the heiress without a single word of farewell. Let's go, he said just that to Melanie. Alicent stayed planted where she was, smile still stuck on, ring twisting faster. 3 people saw the scene. In 20 minutes, 30 would know. In an hour, the whole city. Melanie let her hand close inside his. His fingers were warm, dry, firm. There was no tremor in them, but his jaw had one. She noticed without needing to look. They returned to the penthouse close to midnight. Calder closed the car door, wished her good night with his cap in his hand, and the elevator rose in cushioned silence. Up there, Zane loosened his tie with 2 fingers. He walked straight to the balcony. The October wind came in through the open door, pushing the linen curtain. Melanie dropped her shoes on the way. She went after him, barefoot on the cold floor, with the champagne-colored dress still weighing on her shoulders. He was at the railing, broad back, eyes on the skyline. He pulled a cigarette from the inside pocket of his suit jacket, held it between his fingers without lighting it, as if the presence of the object were enough. "Do you smoke?" she asked. "No." "Then why carry it?" "Old habit." She stopped next to him, rested her forearms on the railing. The city below blinked like a disorganized electrical board. "Your mother," Melanie said softly, because something about the night was asking. "Why did she leave?" He took his time. The cigarette rolled between his fingers. "She left when I was 7. Pause. "She took a suitcase and a book. Left a note for my father. For me, she left nothing." Melanie's mouth opened and closed. "She didn't say I'm sorry because he didn't seem to want to hear it. She didn't touch him because he didn't seem to want to be touched. She stayed. It was the only thing she knew how to do, and it was the right thing." He tilted his head a few degrees toward her without turning his face. "Don't tell anyone. I don't have anyone to tell." That drew from him a short sound that could have been a laugh if he had known how to laugh. He didn't, but the cigarette went back into the pocket, and his hand covered her wrist on the railing. For a second only. Warm. Heavy. Gone. Her phone vibrated in the bag she'd left on the armchair. It vibrated again. It vibrated 3 times in a row. Melanie walked in, barefoot, and read the screen in the blue light of the early hours. Pearson Holdings press office. Official press conference for the Pearson-Whitehead merger scheduled for Wednesday 2 p.m. Plaza Hotel. Mandatory attendance of Miss Preston confirmed. Melanie read it twice, 3 times. Her heart climbed up to her throat. "Zane!" she called, voice thin. He appeared in the balcony doorway, hands in his pockets, eyebrow raised. She turned the screen so he could read. His grey eyes scanned the message in silence. When they came back to her, they'd changed temperature. "Wednesday?" she asked. "Nobody told me there was going to be a press conference. I wasn't trained for a press conference. I don't even know what a real merger is, Zane. I know it involves signatures and important people and a camera, and nobody told me." He crossed the room in 3 steps. He took the phone from her hand. He read it again. His jaw hardened. "Phelan didn't tell me about this, but your press office knew." "Yes." "Who set it up?" Zane looked at the phone like someone looking at a marked card. His voice dropped again, in that way he had when he was controlling something inside that wasn't asking for permission to come out. "My father." Chapter 4. The Clause. Wednesday came with a fine drizzle, the kind Manhattan pretends not to notice. Melanie woke up at the penthouse without having slept properly. The dress chosen by the styling team was hanging on the closet door, navy blue, high collar, modest down to the ruler. She put it on like someone putting on a uniform. Henriette had sent the shoes along with it, mid-height heel, so the young lady doesn't trip in front of the cameras. Melanie mentally thanked the Frenchwoman for taking the falling scenario seriously. Calder was waiting for her in the garage. The car pulled out of the Upper East Side in silence, and the silence inside the car was different from the silence of the street, more velvety, more expensive. Melanie tried to rehearse 3 sentences in the back seat. None of them survived the second repetition. "Are you okay, Miss Melanie?" Calder asked, eyes on the rearview mirror. "I'm going to be." "Good answer." She almost laughed. Almost. The plaza was hosting the press conference in the gold ballroom, the kind that seemed built to impress minor kings. Cameras mounted in 3 rows, radio microphones lined up at the head table, badges hanging from imported necks. Zane was standing in a corner, talking quietly with Phelan, and when he saw Melanie crossing the ballroom, he stopped talking mid-sentence. Phelan walked over to her first. "Miss, breathe." His Mont Blanc was spinning between his fingers. You sit in that chair right there next to him. You smile when they ask for a photo. You don't answer anything. I swear I'll answer for you. Deal? Deal. Excellent. Phelan winked. And if any reporter asks something strange, look at me. I'll wink. You ignore it. Works like a traffic light. She managed to laugh this time. It was a short laugh, but it came out. Zane approached. He didn't say hi. He offered his arm with the formality of someone escorting brides in the last century. Melanie accepted. Her fingers gripped the fabric of his jacket a little tighter than she meant to. He didn't comment. "You're pale," he said, in the lowest voice, when they sat down at the head table. "I'm alive. I think. Look at me when someone asks something you don't know how to answer. Okay, it's going to work out. Are you saying that to me or to yourself?" He didn't answer. He just placed his hand over hers, on top of the table, in full view of all the cameras. The warmth of his palm went through the navy blue dress as if the fabric were a rumor. Constantine Pearson took the stage at 2:03 in the afternoon, punctual as usual. Impeccable grey hair, charcoal grey suit, watch adjusted once before each word. He had the kind of presence that didn't need a microphone, but he used a microphone, because control doesn't pass up an instrument. "Ladies and gentlemen of the press," he began, in the measured voice she already recognized even without having met him in person, because Zane's voice was the younger version of that one. "We are here today to formally announce the happy union between the Pearson and Whitehead families. A business union, yes, but also," studied pause, watch adjusted, "a family union." Melanie felt the blood drop from her shoulders down to her shins. Family. The word hung in the air like a knife. Constantine continued. He spoke of synergies, of legacy, of generational commitment. The cameras clicked. The journalists took notes. Zane, beside her, didn't move. His hand stayed on top of hers, but his fingers had stiffened, and Melanie knew, without hearing a single word from him, that this speech had not been agreed upon. When the Q&A opened, 3 hands went up at the same time. Constantine pointed to the one in the middle, with the gesture of someone handing out time slots. "Juno Albright, Manhattan Pulse," the woman announced herself, voice drawled by cinnamon gum chewed sideways. "Direct question, Mr. Pearson. The contractual clause requiring marriage within 90 days of the Pearson-Whitehead merger, is it still in place? And do you confirm the name of the bride, Miss Melanie Preston, present at this table?" The ballroom went quiet in a way that didn't belong to a ballroom. Melanie smelled the cinnamon cut across the room, her gum 3 rows ahead. Clause, 90 days. Confirm the name. Melanie's eyes searched for Phelan in the corner of the room. The lawyer didn't blink. Worse, he dropped his eyes to the floor. She searched for Zane. Zane was staring straight ahead, jaw locked, and his hand on top of hers turned to stone. She searched for Constantine at the podium. His father stared back at her, and in his eyes there was something Melanie identified immediately, because it was the same thing she saw on the faces of creditors when they came through the door in Queens. Cold curiosity, a bet waiting for its card to turn. She had signed it then. She had signed it and not read it. She had signed it between Wren's greeting in all caps, Phelan's dry laugh and Zane's stare against the window. She had signed 3 days ago, on 4 pages, in 4 fields, here, 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 and here. Standard, standard, standard. Constantine brought the microphone to his lips without rushing. "The clause is an integral part of the agreement, Miss Albright. Naturally, it stands. As for the bride," he turned slightly in the direction of the head table, "she is, as you can see, present." The cameras swung as a block. 40 lenses, maybe 50, plus cell phones she didn't even dare to count, focused on her face. Melanie felt her chin lift on its own. It was a small animal reaction, not the reaction of a steady woman. It was the last scrap of Queen's pride refusing to become a headline of weakness. She smiled. It was a thin, exact smile, rehearsed in 1,000 mirrors of her adult life, and she knew, while she was wearing it, that that photo would be all over Manhattan by that very night. She stood up. Zane's hand fell onto the table when she pulled hers away. He turned to her then, for the first time since Juno's question, and in the grey eyes there was a new thing, something she hadn't seen yet and couldn't name in the second she needed to. "Melanie," he said, low. "Excuse me," she answered loud and clear so the microphone would catch it. "I have an appointment." She crossed the room. Her heels struck the carpet without sound, and yet every step felt like thunder inside her chest. Phelan came toward her. She walked right past him without looking. Calder in the hallway lifted his cap. His read was instant, and he already had the phone to his ear asking for the car to come down now. "Miss Melanie, the car's at the door." "No." "Excuse me. I'm walking." "You don't have a coat, miss." "I know." She crossed the plaza lobby with her spine straight. The revolving doors spat her out onto the sidewalk. The fine drizzle turned into heavy rain in 3 steps. The heel which Henriette had sent on purpose to prevent her from tripping started to sink into the asphalt on 5th, as if the city wanted to hold her there to listen to apologies. She didn't give any. She kept walking because it was the only thing she knew how to do when the ground gave out. Walk. She crossed the street without looking. A cab honked. Another one braked. Melanie didn't stop. The navy blue dress began to cling to her legs, soaked, darker with every step. Her hair, which Henriette had pinned in a low bun, came loose in strands over her forehead. She heard footsteps behind her. Fast footsteps. Footsteps she recognized before she turned. "Melanie!" She kept walking. "Melanie, stop!" She stopped, not because he asked, because her breath ran out. She turned. Zane was on the sidewalk 3 steps behind. No suit jacket on top. The jacket had stayed on the chair. Easy deduction. White shirt plastered to his chest by the rain, tie undone. Dark hair dripping over his forehead. Italian shoes ruined on the wet asphalt. His grey eyes burned in a way she had never seen, and that she knew right away he hadn't shown to anyone in the press, because the press was on the other side of the revolving door, and on the other side of the revolving door, he was still the heart of ice. There in the rain he was something else. "You signed without reading," he said, and his voice was hoarse without its usual control. "You made me sign without reading." "I didn't know about the clause." "But your father did." "Yes." "And you really didn't know?" His jaw tightened. His hands were empty, hanging at his sides in a way that men like him didn't let happen in public. "I didn't read the final version." Pause. Rain. Phelan read it. Phelan told me it was standard. I trusted him. I was wrong. Wrong about what exactly? Her voice rose. "About trusting your lawyer, or about dragging me into a press conference without telling me I was a clause? You're not a clause." "I am today, Zane. I am today." Her tears were already mixed with the rain, and she thanked the weather for once in her life. "I walked into the wrong room, remember? I wasn't supposed to be in this story. You decided. You didn't correct me. You dragged me into lunch, into a boutique, into a gala, and now into a press conference, and now I'm a contractual clause in a billion-dollar merger with a family I don't know, in a 90-day marriage to a man I've known for how long? A week? A whole week?" She was laughing and crying at the same time, and the laugh came out rougher than the cry. "A week, Zane. My feet still hurt from Monday's heels. I haven't even changed heels, and I'm already a clause." He took a step. She stepped back. He stopped. "Melanie, no." "Melanie, listen to me." "No." "One sentence. I'm asking you for one sentence." The rain got worse. People on the sidewalk started opening umbrellas, and through the umbrellas they were watching without really knowing what. A man in a clinging shirt and a woman in a soaked dress, arguing in the middle of 5th on a Wednesday afternoon. Melanie crossed her arms, not to warm herself, to hold herself together. "One," she grunted. He swallowed. It was visible, his Adam's apple moving up and down on the wet skin of his neck. His hands came up out of nowhere and hung in the air, wanting to touch, and without permission to touch. "I never wanted the right bride." His voice broke on the middle syllable, and he kept going anyway without hiding it. "I wanted you." The rain came down harder. Her heel slipped a millimeter on the asphalt. She stayed quiet for too long. Her chest rose and fell, and she knew she was soaked down to her soul, and that even so, that still wasn't the worst part of the day. "Pretty," she said finally, and the word came out dry despite the rain. "Did you rehearse it?" "No." "You should have rehearsed. It came out off key." It was the meanest thing she had ever said in her life, and she said it on purpose, because it hurt less to insult than to confess she had believed him. He took it the way she wanted him to take it. No reaction, jaw locked. His hands, which had risen, went back to his sides. "I'll take you home." "No, thank you." "You don't have a coat." I didn't have any dignity in there either, and no one asked. She turned her back. She walked. She didn't look back, not because she didn't want to, but because she knew that if she looked once she would see the thing she still hadn't been able to name in his grey eyes, and naming it would be worse than not knowing. She walked 3 blocks like that. When she finally stopped under an awning to breathe, she allowed herself to turn her head toward the plaza, far away, small, blurred by the rain. Constantine Pearson was at the revolving door of the hotel, standing, coat on his arm, looking out at the street, at the exact spot where Melanie had argued with his son. The old man's lips weren't moving, but his eyes were, and in his eyes there was what she had recognized in the gold ballroom, now bigger, more naked, more honest. It was the smile of a man who had lost a hand and was enjoying the game. Chapter 5. The Vetoed Resume. The apartment in Queens smelled of chamomile tea and old fabric when Wren shoved the door open with her elbow, a bottle of cheap wine hanging from one finger and a bag of ice pressed to her temple. "Babe." Wren dropped everything on the kitchen table, pinned up her hair with a pencil she pulled from her jacket pocket, and looked at Melanie the way a doctor sizes up a patient. "You look like you cried on the subway." "I didn't cry on the subway." Melanie was curled up in the chair, still wearing the wrinkled dress from the press conference, barefoot, the ring weighing on her hand as if it had tripled in size since that afternoon. "I cried in the cab. The subway was packed." Progress. Wren pulled 2 mugs out of the drying rack because there were no wine glasses in that house. "Your mom?" "Pretending to sleep?" Melanie glanced at the half-open door of the bedroom. She knew the rhythm of Briar's breathing by heart. She knew when it was real sleep, and when it was the sleep of a mother waiting to overhear. Wren poured the wine to the rim of the mug, pushed it toward Melanie, and sat down across from her. She crossed her arms on the worn formica table. "Tell me everything from the beginning. Don't edit," Melanie told her. Walking into the plaza, the merger headline coming out of Constantine's mouth like a weather forecast, the smile from the cinnamon gum editor, the question about the clause her own name said out loud as if it belonged to someone else, the rain, his wet hair, the sentence. He said, Melanie lifted the mug and looked at the wine as if it were an oracle, that he never wanted the right bride, that he wanted me. What? That's a line from a movie. Wren took a sip. That's a line that a man who doesn't say anything memorizes because he knows he'll only get one shot. Unfortunately, a true line. That's the problem, babe. If it were a lie, I would have helped you burn his suit in a dumpster already. Melanie laughed without meaning to, a short, tired laugh, the kind that hurts in your ribs. I signed without reading, Wren. I know. I signed my own marriage without reading. Technically, you signed an agreement that he turned into a marriage different. Wren held up a finger. And worse. The bedroom door creaked softly. Briar didn't come out. She just adjusted her position, making it clear in her quiet way that she was hearing what she needed to hear. Melanie sighed, lowered her voice. I need to talk to him. Tomorrow. Today. Babe. Wren grabbed her hand across the table. You're going to show up at that man's penthouse barefoot, smelling like rain and rage, and he's going to look at you with those storm-grey eyes that look like they came out of a Marvel movie, and you're going to forget every question. Focus, sleep. Tomorrow at 9, clear-headed with an intact heel, you go there and rip the truth out of that man with your teeth if you have to. Melanie looked at the ceiling, at the framed photograph of her mother and father, still young, on the day of their simple wedding in the tiny garden downstairs, at the too big ring on her own finger. With my teeth, she agreed quietly. With your teeth, Wren repeated, and refilled the mug. The next morning, the sky was washed clean from so much rain. Melanie went up to the penthouse in the private elevator that already recognized her floor as if it were routine. The door opened straight into the living room, sunlight coming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, coffee brewed somewhere in the house, a book open on the side table with a pencil mark on a single line. Zane was in the kitchen, barefoot. Melanie stopped in the doorway. It was the first time she had seen him like this. No suit, no shoes, without the whole man assembled in layers of grey and black. White shirt open at the collar, dress pants wrinkled as if he had slept in them, hair damp from a recent shower. His feet, bare on the warmed marble floor, looked like anyone's feet. It was the most intimate detail she had ever seen in that apartment. More intimate than the bedroom, than the balcony, than the cigarette he didn't smoke. He turned. He didn't seem surprised to see her. Maybe Calder had warned him from downstairs. Maybe he had been waiting from the moment she walked out into the rain. "You didn't sleep," Zane said, and his voice came out too low for such a big kitchen. "You didn't either." He slid a mug across the counter toward her. Black coffee, without asking how she took it, because he already knew. Melanie didn't touch the mug. She rested her fingers on the cold stone, took one breath, and asked the question she had memorized in the cab. The contract, the clause, the merger. "I want all of it." "Ask. Is there a contract with a marriage clause?" "There is." "Did I sign it?" "You signed a letter of merger intent last Thursday, in Phelan's office. The marriage clause was in Annex C, page 17. You didn't read it." "Did you know I wouldn't read it?" Zane gripped the edge of the counter with both hands. His knuckles went white for a second. Then he let go. "I knew." Melanie swallowed. The coffee steamed between them. "Did your father know?" "My father wrote Annex C." She almost laughed, that defensive laugh that escapes when the body doesn't know what to do with what it just heard. Instead, she breathed through her nose, slowly, and asked the next question, the one that mattered. "Why me, Zane?" He stayed quiet a second longer than he should have. "Because you walked into the room." "No." Melanie pressed her hand on the stone. "Why didn't you correct me? You had 5 minutes to say Miss Wrong Floor. You had 30 minutes at lunch to say Mercier Mistake. You had 3 weeks, Zane. You had 3 whole weeks to say, this isn't the right bride. And you didn't." Zane looked at the window. The light caught his grey eyes and made them almost translucent for an instant. "Because you were the first thing that happened to me at this company in 4 years that I hadn't scheduled." The sentence landed between them like a glass set down on the table too slowly to avoid making noise. Melanie took a while to answer. When she did, her voice came out firm. "I want to see the papers." Zane didn't argue. He crossed the kitchen, opened the door to the adjoining office, disappeared for a minute. He came back with a matte leather portfolio, the kind Phelan usually carried. He set it on the dining table. "Everything's in there. The merger agreement, Annex C, the communications to the board." Melanie opened it. She flipped through. The words danced. Marriage clause, 90-day term, monetary penalty in case of unilateral rescission. Her name printed at the bottom of the page as if it had always been there. Her signature rounded and slightly slanted to the right, the way Briar had taught her when she was little. Beneath the last page, folded in half, was another sheet. Thinner, different paper, old cream color. Melanie pulled it out. It was a resume. Hers. The photo she had taken months ago in a 4-photo booth for $5 at the subway station. The modest experience. Receptionist at a dental office, internship at an insurance company, 3 years at a school secretary's office. The email she checked every hour, and in the upper right corner stamped in red, vetoed. Below it a short signature, ZP the date, 3 months before the day she broke her heel on the subway stairs, and written by hand in the margin in firm, angled handwriting that she had begun to recognize from the company memos she had seen on Phelan's desk. Fragile profile. Melanie laughed. It was an ugly laugh, the kind that comes out with a sob in the middle. "Fragile," she repeated without looking at him. "Melanie. Fragile." She held up the resume. "You read my name 3 months before the interview, decided I couldn't handle the secretary's job at Pearson Holdings, and vetoed me. With your signature. I didn't remember the name when you walked in. But the name was here." She tapped the paper with her finger. "It was here the whole time. You just didn't bother to make the connection." He didn't answer. He didn't try. And that was worse than any lie. Melanie took a deep breath. She slowly slipped off the ring, the big, heavy ring with the blue-tinted stone cut to reflect expensive chandeliers. She placed it on top of the resume, on top of the word vetoed, on top of his signature. "I'm not fragile, Zane." Her voice came out calm, and that was the scariest part of the whole morning to her. "I'm tired," which is a different thing and one that men like you don't know how to tell apart. She turned around. She crossed the living room. She didn't look at his bare feet one last time, because she knew that if she did, she might stay. "Melanie." She didn't stop. "Melanie, wait." She didn't stop. The elevator door opened right away, as if the whole house had learned to obey her footsteps. Melanie stepped in. She pressed the ground floor. The doors closed on the image of him standing in the middle of the marble, barefoot with her resume in his hand. The elevator was mirrored on all four sides. Melanie pressed her forehead to the cold glass and closed her eyes. She counted to 10. She counted to 20. At number 17, her phone vibrated in the pocket of her coat. Unknown number. She answered without thinking, the reflex of someone who has been waiting for a call from the hospital for too long. "Miss Preston." The voice was measured, legal, cold as polished marble. She knew right away before he even introduced himself. "Constantine Pearson. I'm taking the liberty of contacting you directly." Melanie lifted her head off the glass. The elevator was passing the 40th floor. "Mr. Pearson, I understand there was a small miscommunication yesterday afternoon." There was a pause, and she heard on the other end the discreet tick of a watch being adjusted. "I would like to reiterate, with the delicacy this conversation deserves, that the marriage between you and my son remains on the family's agenda." "The marriage isn't on my agenda." "Miss Preston." The voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "Allow me to be very clear. Should you fail to appear at the altar within the contractually established term, I will personally ensure that no fashion editor in this city replies to your email, that no boutique receives your sketches, that no internship survives. You can try São Paulo, perhaps London. I know people in London, too." The elevator passed the 30th floor. Melanie swallowed dryly. "You're threatening me." "I'm guiding. I prefer to guide." She stayed silent. Somewhere in her chest a new anger was born, not the anger at Zane which tasted like disappointment. This one was different, cleaner, more useful. "Mr. Pearson." Her voice came out firmer than she expected. "You wrote Annex C because you thought I was too small to read it. I just read it, and you made the same mistake your son did." "What mistake?" "Thinking I was fragile." She hung up. The elevator stopped at the ground floor. The doors opened in silent courtesy. Melanie leaned her forehead against the mirror one more time, closed her eyes, counted to 3. When she opened them, Phelan Marlowe was standing in the lobby, in a grey suit, Mont Blanc pen in his inside pocket, his usual considered expression. He didn't look surprised to see her, nor did he look comfortable. "Miss Preston." "Phelan." Her voice was still trembling from the call. "You knew about the veto." "I found out last night." "Did you lie?" "I didn't answer questions no one asked." He took a step toward her, lowered his voice. "There's a difference I pay a high price to maintain. I'm not proud of it today." Melanie breathed. Phelan looked at the floor for a second, then at her. He cancelled his schedule, all of it. His voice came out firm, still lower than usual. He cancelled Zurich, cancelled Tokyo, cancelled the meeting with the board. Tomorrow at 9, press room at headquarters. He asked me to let you know first, before the press, before his father. "Let me know what?" Phelan hesitated. For the first time since she had known him, he truly hesitated. "I don't know what he's going to say. I only know that he asked me to do something I had never seen him ask for." "Which was?" Phelan adjusted the pen in his pocket. He looked at her like someone handing over a key. "To cancel the merger contract before you woke up tomorrow, no matter what happened in the meantime." Melanie stood in the middle of the lobby, frosted glass reflecting the grey light of Park Avenue out there, ring no longer on her finger, stamped resume still burning behind her eyes. Phelan stepped aside to leave the revolving door free. He didn't say anything else, he just waited. She walked past him and out without looking back. Chapter 6. Stay, because you want to. The press room at Pearson headquarters had been full since before 8. Melanie knew because Wren had called 3 times out of breath, describing the lobby as if it were a live broadcast soccer match. "Babe, there are cameras from every channel. There's that cinnamon gum woman. There's a reporter from CNBC. There's a photographer hanging off the staircase. Focus, I'm watching it now on TV. Turn it on, turn it on, turn it on." Melanie had already turned it on. She was sitting on the worn-out couch in the living room of the apartment in Queens, in sweatpants and an old t-shirt. Her mother next to her hemming a skirt without looking at the screen, the way she hemmed anything when she was too anxious to talk. The image cut to the stage. Zane came in through the side door. Grey suit, no tie. Hair combed in a hurry the way he had it when he had slept badly. Behind him Phelan, with the Mont Blanc pen resting on his pad. Further behind, coming down the corridor, Constantine Pearson, watch being adjusted. Expression of someone who still thought he controlled the script. Constantine tried to intercept his son before the microphone. He held out a hand, lowered his voice for the greeting that always preceded family announcements. Zane walked right past him. He didn't deflect. He didn't pull back. He simply walked past, as if his father were a misplaced chair. Melanie lifted her chin. Briar stopped sewing. Zane placed both hands on the wood of the podium and looked straight at the central camera. "Good morning." His voice came out dry, the way it did in board meetings. "I've called the press here to correct information released by this company yesterday afternoon." Pause. The hall went quiet in a way you could hear from the other side of the screen. "The Pearson-Whitehead merger is cancelled, effective immediately. There is no marriage clause in force, there is no contractual bride. Miss Melanie Preston is not, as of this date, under any binding commitment to this company, to the Whitehead family, or to the board of this holding." Murmuring. "Hands up." Juno Albright, in the right corner, stopped chewing her gum for the first time in her career. "Mr. Pearson," she raised her microphone, "was this decision made with the consent of the chairman of the board?" Zane looked at Constantine. Constantine didn't answer. He just stayed where he was on the side of the stage, hand on his watch. "The decision is mine," Zane said. "I am the CEO of this company. I answer for the name I carry, and I will not use that name to buy a woman who is not for sale." Briar dropped the needle in her lap. She looked at Melanie. She didn't say anything. She just reached out and held her daughter's hand on top of the couch. Another reporter stood up. "Is there a real romantic involvement between you and Miss Preston?" Zane was silent for a second. It was a cinema second, the kind measured in nobody's breaths. "I won't answer for her." His voice came out lower. "But I will answer for me. Yes, there is." The room exploded. Cameras clicking, hands in the air, someone shouting his name. Constantine walked out the side door without answering any question. Phelan, behind Zane, lowered his face and, Melanie saw it clearly, even through the screen, suppressed a smile. The broadcast cut to the studio. The anchor trying to figure out the script. Melanie brought her hand to her mouth. Briar kept holding the other one. "My golden thread." Her mother's voice came out softly, the way she spoke when something was important. "That boy just cancelled a billion-dollar marriage on national TV to let you know he likes you." "I know, Mom." "What are you waiting for to go see him?" Melanie breathed. "I'm waiting for him to ask." He asked at 7 in the evening. Phelan rang the doorbell of the apartment in Queens. Light blue shirt wrinkled, pen in his pocket. A faint sound of fine rain hitting the building staircase behind him. "Miss Preston." Phelan looked at her with that polite seriousness of someone who never learned to fake. "He's on the rooftop. He didn't ask me to come get you, but I came." Melanie grabbed her coat off the hook. Briar waved from the armchair without getting up, now sewing a hem that didn't need a hem. "Come back whenever you want, my golden thread." "I'll come back tomorrow, Mum." "Come back whenever you want," Briar repeated, and lowered her eyes to the fabric. The penthouse was silent when the elevator opened. The lights low, the door to the rooftop terrace half open. October wind coming in along with the smell of recent rain on the stones of the railing. Melanie crossed the dark wood floor, coat pressed against her body, and opened the door to the terrace. Zane was standing with his back to her, black coat open, shoulders tense, hands shoved in his pockets. The view of Manhattan opened up behind him in yellow and blue dots, the city he had cancelled that morning to talk about her on television. He turned at the sound of her footsteps. His hair was tousled from the wind, his shirt open at the collar, no tie, for the second time in her life. The grey eyes found hers and stayed there, without armour. He didn't come with a speech. He didn't come with a portfolio. He didn't come with anything. "You cancelled the merger," Melanie said. Her voice came out firmer than she expected. "I cancelled it. You stood up to your father." "I did. You said on national television that there is real romantic involvement." "I said it." She stopped 3 steps from him, wind between them, her hair whipping across her face. "Why?" Zane didn't answer right away. He took his hands out of his pockets. He didn't hold them out. He left them at his sides, as if he had just discovered he had hands and still didn't know what to do with them. "Because I vetoed your resume without knowing you," he said, and his voice came out hoarse, the way it comes out when the man who doesn't say much decides for the first time in his life to tell the truth in front of someone who matters. "Because I called you fragile on paper before I knew you had walked across Fifth Avenue in the rain with a cracked heel and still sat in my chair." Pause. "Because I let myself, for 4 years, not look at anything that wasn't on the agenda. And you walked into the wrong room on the wrong day and forced me to look." He swallowed. "And I looked," Melanie breathed. The wind pushed her hair back. "You didn't apologize for anything, Zane." "I don't know how to apologize." He raised one hand, hesitated, let it fall again. "I know how to cancel a merger. I know how to fire a board. I know how to buy a building. I don't know how to apologize." Pause. "But I can learn, if you stay." She stayed quiet. She looked at the city. She looked at his feet, dress shoes today, not bare. She looked at the open coat, at the wind moving the fabric, at the whole man who that morning had dismantled an empire because of her. "Ask simply," she said. Zane didn't look away. "Stay. Because you want to." Melanie felt the smile rise before she decided if she wanted it. "Only if I get to boss you around at home?" There was a half-second pause, one of those where the universe breathes, before Zane took a step. And another. And when he got close, his hand came up to her face with the same calm of someone handling a fragile object he knows isn't fragile. He leaned in. Melanie lifted her chin. The first real kiss was slow. Slow on purpose. Slow like someone learning a new language letter by letter. His mouth tasted of mint and rain, and his hand found the nape of her neck as if it already knew the way by heart from thinking so much about doing it without doing it. His other hand found the belt of her coat and pulled, slowly but firmly, like someone who had found what he had been losing in an old drawer and didn't intend to give it back. Melanie leaned into his chest. She felt his heart beating under the fabric, in a rhythm out of sync with hers, louder than the wind. "Come inside with me," he said against her mouth. "I'll come." The hallway was short. The bedroom door closed behind the two of them, with the discreet click of an expensive lock.
Hey, Rowan here. That's it for Book 1, but guess what? Book 2 is already done. You can grab access to it for just a small fee.
The morning was perfect. Melanie crossed the hallway in his shirt, which covered her almost to the knee. Zane was already at the kitchen table. Dress pants, dark grey sweater, hair still damp from the shower. "He's so hot," she was thinking. Then he leaned over without warning and kissed her temple. It was a short kiss, automatic, the kind that belongs to couples who have been doing this for years. Melanie swallowed. She felt that something was off, but she ignored it, because today was a special day. She ran her hand over her still flat stomach and had a goofy smile on her face. It had already been a day with 2 blue lines. Zane had left early, but had left the usual note. Fresh coffee. Back by 8. They were good. Happy. She was going to tell him on his birthday with a stupid balloon that said, "Is there a mini CEO on the way?" She went out for a walk in Central Park, light, in love, until her phone buzzed. Headline, Zane Pearson and Sterling Vance, 3 discreet dinners in 4 days. She laughed, until she saw the photos. They were holding hands, cuddled up with wide smiles, leaving a hotel at dawn. Melanie ran to Pearson Holdings. The door to his office was ajar. Through the gap, Sterling had her hand on his tie, forehead on his shoulder, Zane holding her wrist and handing her an envelope. Then she threw herself at him and kissed him. The world collapsed. She ran down the emergency stairs. On the third flight, the heel cracked, her ankle twisted, her belly gave a sharp pang. She fell. Hot blood ran down her leg. "No! Stay!" she whispered, pressing her belly. "Please, stay!" Everything went dark while desperate footsteps came down the stairs behind her.
Like I said, that was just a taste of Book 2. To watch it uncensored, just click on the first link here in the pinned comment. I'll see you on the other side in a few seconds. Remember, just click on the first link down here in the comments, and Book 2 complete, no ads, no interruptions, will already be available for you. It's very simple. Book 2 is something I'm loving making. You're loving it too, so I promise there will be more. It's where you find increasingly spicy stories, a true dark romance. And precisely because this version is getting more and more heated, the video isn't well accepted publicly on YouTube. This closed environment is where I can actually share my essence and where I feel free to do my best work for you. More news coming soon. I'll be waiting for you on the other side. Now, unfortunately, a lot of people have been downloading our audio, effectively copying the entire story, and just re-uploading it to YouTube. If you want to watch the original story and be the first to get the next ones, search for My Stories by Rowan on YouTube for the best Billionaire and CEO Romance content. Remember, the official channel is My Stories by Rowan on YouTube and the My Stories platform. I'll be waiting for you there. Love, Rowan. Congratulations! Your purchase has been confirmed, and you now have full access to books 1 and 2 of all our stories, completely ad-free and uninterrupted. Everything is available on the My Stories platform, from Mafia Romance and Billionaire Romance to our spicier tales. This content is ready for you now, with new episodes added daily. Access is simple. Just log in using the same email address you used for your purchase. A confirmation has also been sent to that same email. The My Stories platform is very simple and intuitive. Each image represents a story. If it has a book 2, just click and press play. Everything is already unlocked for you. You can also rate each story, leave a like, and write a comment. Your feedback will be visible to all our other subscribers. This is our romance universe, so please feel free to interact. From this moment on, this is officially your home for romance stories. Just head over to mystoriesromance.com and press play. Welcome to the family.